Today, we're gonna talk about global migration. To the end of discussion, we will able to identify the reason for the migration of people, explain why states regulate migration, and discuss the effects of global migration on the economic well-being of states. In this lesson, we'll look at global migration and its impact on both the sending and receiving countries. Although we will cite numerous challenges relating to migration. Migration should not be considered a problem. There is nothing moral or immoral about moving from one country to another. Human beings have always been migratory. It is the result of their movements that areas get populated, communities experience diversity, and economies prosper. Thus, rather than looking at migration in terms of simplistic good or bad lens, treat it as a complex social phenomenon that even predates contemporary globalization. First, what is migration? There are two types of migration. Internal migration, which refers to people moving from one area to another within one country, and international migration, in which people cross borders of one country to another. The first latter can be further broken down into 5 groups. First are those who have permanently to another country, or immigrants. The second refers to workers who stay in another country for a fixed period, at least 6 months in a year. Third, illegal migrants comprise the third group, while the fourth are the migrants whose families have petitioned them to move to the destination country. The fifth group are refugees, also known as asylum seekers, those unable or unwilling to return because of a well-founded fear of persecution on account of race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. The latter can be further broken down into 5 groups. First are those who move permanently to another country, or immigrants. The second refers to workers who stays in another country for a fixed period, at least 6 months in a year. Illegal migrants comprise the third group, while the fourth are the migrants whose families have petitioned them to move to the destination country. The fifth group are refugees, also known as asylum seekers. Example, those unable or unwilling to return because of a well-founded fear of persecution on account of race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. Demographers estimate that 247 million people are currently living outside the countries of their birth. 90% of them moved for economic reasons, while the remaining 10% were refugees and asylum seekers. There are top 3 regions. First region are Latin America, 18% of global total, followed by Eastern Europe and Central Asia, 16%, and the Middle East and North Africa, 14%. On a per-country basis, India, Mexico, and China are leading, with the Philippines, together with Afghanistan, only ranking 6th in the world. The top 10 country destinations of these migrants are mainly in the West and Middle East, with the United States topping the list.
50% of global migrants have moved from developing countries to the developed zones of the world and contribute anywhere from 40 to 80% of their labor force. Their growth has outstripped the population growth in the developed countries, 3% versus only 0.6%, such that today, according to the think tank McKinsey Global Institute, first-generation immigrants constitute 13% of the population in Western Europe, 15% in North America, and 48% in the GCC countries. The majority of migrants remain in the cities. The percentages of migrants in the cities are 92% in the United States, 95% in the United Kingdom, and 99% in Australia. Once settled, they contribute enormously to raising the productivity of their host countries, shown in Table 1. Migrant influx has led to a debate in destination countries over the issue of whether migrants are assets or liabilities to national development. So, ang migrant influx is nag-debate sila sa mga destination countries about sa issue sa mga migrants, kung makatabang ba ang mga migrants sa development sa national or sa country or dili. Anti-immigrant groups and nationalists argue that governments must control legal immigration and put stop to illegal entry of foreigners. Many of these anti-immigrant groups are gaining influence through political leaders who share their beliefs. Include U.S. President Donald Trump and UK Prime Minister Theresa May, who have been reversing the existing pro-immigration and refugee-sympathetic policies of their states. Most recently, Trump attempted to ban travel into the United States of people from majority Muslim countries, even those with proper documentation. He also continues to speak about his election promise of building a wall between the United States and Mexico.
The data repeatedly refute the wisdom of these government interventions. The likelihood and magnitude of adverse labor market effects for natives from immigrations are substantially weaker than often perceived. It is according to a 2011 Harvard Business School survey. And the fiscal impact of immigration and social welfare was noted to very small. In addition, the 2013 Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, report on government welfare spending clearly demonstrates that native-born citizens still make up the majority of welfare recipients. Alarms have been aroused once more by the large influx of refugees from Syria and Iraq, although the effects have not been as negative as anticipated. The International Monetary Fund expected that, albeit modestly, the influx of refugees fleeing the war in Syria and Iraq will increase Europe's GDP. The Middle Eastern refugee influx has had little to no influence on earnings and employment in Germany and has not damaged social welfare systems. In actuality, they provided the economy with much needed labor. Therefore, immigrants are neither a drain on the public budget nor a solution to the country's financial problem. In the majority of nations, with the exception of those where a high proportion of older immigrants reside, immigrants pay more in taxes and social contributions than they receive in direct benefits. Economic growth is impacted by both direct and indirect consequences of international migration. There is little doubt that the overall GDP can be anticipated to increase in areas where migration increases the workforce. Concerning the development of the per capita GDP, things are less apparent. If our societies are to effectively discuss the role of migration, it is crucial to understand these effects. These discussions are crucial for creating policies in fields like education and employment that maximize the advantages of migration, particularly through enhancing migrants' job circumstances. Analyzing the individual qualities that immigrants bring can help us better understand the economic effects of immigration on receiving economies. When analyzing the general equilibrium consequences of immigration, it is crucial to take into account the complementarity and substitutability of immigrants and natives in the workforce, as well as the response of the recipients' economies in terms of specialization and technical option.
Remittances likewise change the economic and social standing of migrants, as shown by new or renovated homes and their relatives' access to new consumer goods. The purchasing power of a migrant's family doubles and makes it possible for children to start or continue their schooling. Okay, so what is remittances? Remittances are the transfer of funds between parties as a bill, an invoice, or even a gift. However, remittance refers more broadly to the funds migrants send to their relatives in their home and country while working and living abroad. These are also referred to a worker or migrant transfers. Yet, there remain serious concerns about the economic sustainability of those reliant on migrant monies. The Ancient Development Bank or ADB observes that in countries like the Philippine remittances do not have a significant influence on other key items of consumption or investment such as spending on education and healthcare. Remittances, therefore, may help in lifting households out of poverty, but not in rebalancing growth, especially in the long run. What is an example of remittances? The example for this one is you might be sending funds to your family abroad, whether as a wedding gift or contributing towards bills back home. How do remittances help us or a country? So, remittances can increase the well-being of receiving household by smoothing consumption and improving living conditions. Remittances also can facilitate the accumulation of human capital by making possible improved sanitary conditions, healthier lifestyle, proper health care, and greater educational attainment. More importantly, global migration is supporting qualified personnel and removing dynamic young workers. So, a global migration is a situation in which people go to live in foreign countries, especially in order to find work. Most global migration is from developing countries to developed ones. There are three types of migrants: asylum seekers, economic migrants, and refugees.
This topic shall be known as the brain drain. Mackenzie Global Institute claimed that some countries like Sub-Saharan Africa and Asia has decreased the numbers of college graduates up to 1/3, with some even moving to the OECD. The occupation mostly related were for the doctors. Some from Sub-Saharan African countries had immigrated to the United States of Canada. Some occupational topics were also followed by Liberia, Ghana, and Uganda. The government did not restrict the people from moving from one place to another in order to respect the state's policy because of the remittances' impact on the GDP. They are evenly concerned to the problems, putting the government into action, where Bangladesh put up the Office of the Protector of Immigrants within the Indian Labor Ministry. As for the Philippines, we put up Philippine Overseas Employment Agency. The people shall then be putting their trusts into these institutions. The problems of human trafficking. Other from the brain drain issue, workers are also concerned about their safety due to the problems of human trafficking. To describe what is human trafficking is the recruitment, transportations, transfer, harboring, or receipt of the people through force, fraud, or deception with the aim of exploiting them for profit. Men, women, and children of all ages and from all backgrounds can become victims of this crime, which occurs in every region of this world. The United States Federal Bureau has listed human trafficking as the third most concerning act of criminality. According to the International Labor Organization or ILO, 21 million men and women and children victims of the Criminality Act. The Criminality Act involved the people who are exploited to private enterprises and entrepreneurs, being sexually abused, work under compulsion in agricultural, manufacturing, infrastructure, and domestic activities. The outbreak of human trafficking made the criminals profit as high as $150. That's why the law is also into action. The Republic Act of 9208 is the Anti-Trafficking Act which aims to stop this problem, and with the civil society groups also doing an action.
Integration. A final issue relates to how migrants interact with their new home countries. They may contribute significantly to a host nation GDP, but their access to housing, healthcare, and education is not easy. There is considerable variation in economic integration of migrants. Migrants from China, India, and Western Europe often have more success, while those from the Middle East, North Africa, and Sub-Saharan Africa face greater challenges in security jobs. The United States and Singapore, there are blue-collar as well as white-collar Filipino workers, or doctors, engineers, even corporate executives, and it is the professional, white-collar workers that have oftentimes been easier to integrate. GDP means gross domestic product. It is the monetary value of all finished goods and services made within a country during a specific period. GDP has the four components, including personal consumption, business investment, government spending, and net exports. Linguistic difficulties custom from the old country, and of late, differing religions may create cleavages between migrants and citizens of receiving countries, particularly in the West. The latter accuse migrants of bringing in the culture from their home countries and amplifying differences in linguistic and ethnic custom. Crucially, the lack of integration gives xenophobic and anti-migrant groups more ammunition to argue that these new citizens are often not nationals or in the sense of sharing the dominant culture.
Migrants unwittingly reinforce the tension by keeping among themselves. The first-time migrants is anxiety to coming into a new strange place. So what do we mean by migrant? Migrant is a person who moves from one place to another place in order to find work or better living conditions. Local networks of fellow citizens. This network serves as the migrant's safety net from the dislocation of uprooting oneself. Benevolent Association of California. This association provides initial support for new Chinese migrants and guiding them in finding work and setting up their small businesses like restaurants and laundromats. But there are disadvantages of this network. The disadvantage of these networks is that instead of facilitating integration, they exacerbate these differences and discrimination. Government and private businesses. They made policies changes to address integration problems, like in the case of the United States, Spanish and English, they use multiple languages. In stating documents. Training programs. Training programs also help migrants' integration in Hamburg, Germany, while retail merchants in Barcelona have brought in migrant shopkeepers to break down language barriers while introducing Chinese culture.
In our conclusion, migration can be a freeing experience for some migrant workers, but it can also be upsetting and disempowering to others. A highly educated professional could discover a financial rewards in relocating to another nations. On the other hand, a sex trafficking victim can have a different perspective on the migrations process. Like globalization, migration produces different, often contradictory responses in developed countries. Some want to preserve what they perceive as a local culture by shielding it from newcomers. Other states use migrants as a scapegoat, blaming them for economic woes that are, in reality, caused by government policies. One of the most important concerns in the modern world is global migration. The economies of nations that are totally dependent on globalization will actively recruit foreign laborers. Likewise, nations with a surplus of labor and demand of remittances, like the Philippines, will send these workers. As a result, it is unavoidable that nations will need to liberalize once more to stop their economies from declining or even collapsing. Xenophobia and strong nationalism is the receiving nations, as well as reliance in the giving countries, are some of the various responses to these migrations that will continue to be urgent problems.